The crystalline spires of Nueva Harmonia stretched endlessly into the violet skies of Nexer Prime, each tower a testament to 10,000 years of perfect order. Architect Synthvella stood at her observation post, her silver skin reflecting the three setting suns, while her neural interface processed the day's efficiency reports. Every citizen was exactly where they needed to be. Every system functioned at optimal capacity. Every thought aligned with the greater good. It was, by all metrics, perfect. And that perfection was about to be their undoing. Architect Synth, a voice called from behind her. The council requires your presence immediately. Vela turned to face Monitor Synth Karn, noting the subtle vibration in his usually steady voice pattern. In their society, such imperfection in vocal modulation was nearly unprecedented. The Nexar had long since engineered away such instabilities, along with the emotional turbulence that caused them. The Great Hall of Harmony curved around them as they walked, its walls shifting and flowing like liquid metal. The Council of Nine waited in their traditional configuration, a perfect nonagon, each member exactly equidistant from the center. Yet today, their customary geometric precision seemed strained. Architect Synth Vela. Primary Synth Mira acknowledged, her voice carrying the weight of 10 millennia of leadership. What we are about to share will disturb the harmony. We ask that you activate your cognitive stabilizers. Vela complied, feeling the familiar wave of chemical balance flood her system. I am prepared, Primary Synth. The chamber's central hologram activated, displaying a massive tear in space-time. But unlike the normal cosmic phenomena they regularly documented and studied, this tear seemed to writhe with purpose. As Vela watched, mathematical patterns within the anomaly shifted and changed, displaying an impossible level of organization. We call it the ordered void. Mira continued. First detected at the edges of the Nexer sphere 3 cycles ago. Since then, it has consumed 3 outer colonies. Consumed. Vela's stabilizers struggled to process the concept. Observe. The hologram shifted to show footage from one of the colonial outposts. Vela watched as a wave of perfectly geometric patterns swept across the colony surface. Where it touched, matter didn't destroy so much as reorganize. Buildings, people, even the planet's crust itself was transformed into crystalline structures of impossible complexity. It feeds on order, another council member explained. The more organized a system, the more it is drawn to it, the more perfectly it annihilates it. Vela's enhanced mind raced through the implications. Then our civilization is the perfect prey. Mira finished. Our very strengths, our harmony, our perfect social order, our technological precision, make us irresistible to this entity. We have calculated that it will reach Nexer Prime within 50 cycles. Surely our defensive systems are useless. Karn interrupted, another unprecedented break from protocol. The entity absorbs and repurposes our technology faster than we can deploy it. Our perfection is our weakness. Each solution we devise is too predictable, too ordered. It anticipates and counters every move we make. Vela felt something she hadn't experienced since before her final synthesis. Uncertainty. What are our options? The council members exchanged looks, their perfect synchronization faltering for the first time in living memory. Primary Synth Mira raised her hand, and a new hologram appeared. It showed a small blue-green planet in an unremarkable spiral arm of the galaxy. We need something the ordered void cannot predict, cannot absorb, cannot understand. Mira's voice carried an unfamiliar edge. We need chaos. Vela studied the hologram, recognition slowly dawning. Earth, the quarantine world. But there, primitive, violent, emotional, unpredictable. Karn listed each trait as if they were virtues rather than the flaws the Nexer had always considered them to be. Precisely. We have spent millennia perfecting ourselves, Mira continued, removing aggression, emotional instability, the capacity for violence. We achieved paradise. But now we face an enemy that weaponizes that very perfection against us. We need beings who still possess what we have sacrificed. The hologram zoomed in on Earth, showing snippets of human activity. Wars, art, dance, sports, love, rage. Each image more chaotic and incomprehensible than the last of Vela's ordered mind. The humans have something we lost long ago, Mira said softly. The ability to create disorder, to act illogically, to fight not with perfect strategy, but with passion and improvisation. Their minds are not ordered systems that can be predicted and consumed. They are beautiful chaos incarnate. You're suggesting we break the quarantine. Make contact. Vela could barely process the magnitude of such a violation of their most sacred protocols. We are suggesting more than that, Mira replied. We are suggesting that we ask them to save us. The chamber fell silent as the implications hung in the air. The Nexar, masters of 1,000,000 worlds, perfect beings who had achieved harmony beyond imagination, would have to humble themselves before a species they had long dismissed as barely more than savages. There will be resistance to this plan, Vela finally said. Of course there will be, Karn replied. Change is the enemy of order. But for the first time in our history, that may be exactly what we need. Primary synth Mira stood, her movement causing ripples of light to dance across the chamber walls. Architect Synth Vela, you have been chosen for a special task. You will be our first ambassador to Earth. Your synthetic systems are the most adaptable among us, your mind the most capable of processing disorder. Vela felt her stabilizers struggle to maintain equilibrium as she contemplated the assignment. To walk among humans, to immerse herself in chaos, everything in her ordered mind rebelled against the very concept. But as the hologram showed another colony falling to the geometric perfection of the ordered void, she understood. Perfect order, it seemed, had a price. And soon, they would all have to decide if they were willing to pay it. I accept the assignment, she said, her voice carrying a slight tremor that would have been unthinkable just hours before. As she left the council chamber, Vela looked up at the immaculate spires of Nueva Harmonia. For the first time in her existence, their perfect symmetry didn't fill her with peace. It filled her with fear. The descent through Earth's atmosphere was anything but orderly. Vela's ship, deliberately designed to appear crude by Nexar standards, shuddered and sparked as it pushed through the mesosphere. The humans had to believe this was their first interstellar journey. The truth of the Nexar's long observation of Earth would only breed mistrust. Captain Sarah Chen stood at the Joint Space Command's Operations Center, watching the unusual object's descent with a mixture of anticipation and concern. After decades of searching the stars for signs of intelligent life, first contact was happening on a random Tuesday afternoon. All weapons systems are tracked on the bogey, her XO reported. But I've got to say, Captain, if this is an invasion, it's the most poorly executed one I've ever seen. Sarah had to agree. The alien craft was broadcasting on every frequency, its message a simple repeat. We come seeking help. We mean no harm. It had made no attempt to evade detection and had followed every instruction from ground control precisely. Either these aliens were the worst invaders in history, or they were telling the truth. Talk to me about the landing zone, Sarah ordered, pushing away memories of all the first contact disaster movies she'd watched as a kid. Edwards Air Force Base is secured, ma'am. 3 layers of perimeter security, air support standing by, and enough firepower to start World War III if these visitors turn out to be hostile. The ship touched down with all the grace of a drunk penguin, kicking up a cloud of desert dust. As the particles settled, Sarah could see it wasn't actually damage, just deliberately ungainly, like someone trying too hard to appear non-threatening. When the hatch opened, Sarah's first thought was that their visitor looked disappointingly human-like. Tall, silvery-skinned, but basically humanoid. Her second thought was that something was deeply wrong with the way it moved. Too precise, too measured, as if every gesture had been calculated to the millisecond. I am Architect Synth Vela of the Nexar Collective, the alien announced, its voice carrying an artificial perfection that made the hairs on Sarah's neck stand up. "I come seeking humanity's assistance in preventing the extinction of my species." Sarah had rehearsed first contact protocols 100 times, but somehow "sorry, what?" slipped out instead of the carefully diplomatic greeting she prepared. Vela's head tilted exactly 45 degrees. "Perhaps I should have opened with less direct information. Your species tends to prefer social preliminaries before addressing critical matters." "No, direct is fine," Sarah managed. "You said extinction." "Correct. We face an entity that destroys through perfect order. We require humanity's capacity for chaos and irrationality to combat it." Sarah blinked. Of all the reasons she'd imagined aliens might first contact Earth, "We need you because you're messy" hadn't made the list. "Let me get this straight," General Martinez interrupted, his voice heavy with skepticism. "You're an advanced civilization that engineered away violence and disorder, and now you need our help because you're too perfect." "Correct," Vela replied. "The entity converts ordered systems into complex crystalline structures. The more organized the system, the more efficiently it is consumed. The Nexer Collective represents the most ordered civilization in known space. We are, essentially, an irresistible feast. And you think we can help because we're, what, messy?" Sarah asked. "Your species exhibits high levels of productive disorder. You create art that follows no logical pattern. You engage in recreational activities with no practical purpose. You make decisions based on emotional impulses rather than rational calculation. These traits, which we once considered primitive, may be our only hope for survival." The humans in the room exchanged glances. Sarah couldn't decide whether to be insulted or amused. "Show them the combat footage," General Martinez suggested. Vela observed with fascinating intensity as they played videos of human military exercises. Her silver eyes widened at demonstrations of guerrilla warfare, feints, and especially improvised explosive devices. "Fascinating," she murmured. "You deliberately introduce random elements into your tactical planning. You intentionally create confusion to achieve your objectives. This is exactly what we need." "And what exactly would helping you entail?" Sarah asked. "We require human military advisors, strategic planners, and," Vela seemed to struggle with the next word, "artists. The entity cannot predict what it cannot understand. Human creativity, your capacity for illogical innovation, may be the key to defeating it." "Artists." General Martinez scoffed. "You want to fight your cosmic horror with interpretive dance." "The entity operates on perfect mathematical principles," Vela explained. "It cannot process abstract expression. When we showed it human music, it attempted to analyze the patterns and experience what you might call a system crash. Imagine what a combined force of human military strategy and artistic chaos could achieve." Sarah looked around the room at her fellow humans, scientists, soldiers, and the hastily assembled cultural advisors. They were being asked to help save an advanced civilization, specifically because they weren't advanced enough to have engineered away their flaws. "I have been authorized to offer Earth full access to Nexer technology in exchange for your assistance," Vela added. "Though I must warn you, much of it may prove too ordered for your species to fully utilize." "Was that a joke?" Sarah asked, surprised. "No. Though I understand why you might interpret it as such. Your species often uses humor to cope with uncomfortable situations. This is another trait we may need to learn from you." General Martinez leaned forward. "Let me be clear. You're offering us advanced technology in exchange for teaching you how to be more human." "Correct. Though I must admit, the concept of human is proving more complex than our millennia of observation suggested. You are ordered and chaotic, rational and emotional, peaceful and violent, all simultaneously. It is fascinating." Sarah stood up, her mind made up. "Well, I suppose there's only one human way to respond to this situation." Vela tilted her head. "And that is?" "We're going to need a bigger conference room," several whiteboards, and probably a lot of coffee. If we're going to teach an advanced civilization how to embrace chaos, we should probably start with the basics of brainstorming. As the humans began to mobilize, Vela watched with a mixture of horror and hope as their planning session immediately devolved into multiple loud conversations, argument, and someone suggesting they order pizza. It was chaos. It was inefficient. It was exactly what the Nexer needed to learn. The price of perfect order had come due. Now it was time to learn the value of beautiful chaos. The Nexer testing facility had never witnessed anything like it. Where once stood perfectly aligned rows of simulation chambers, now sprawled a chaotic array of what the humans called training grounds. Scrap metal, improvised obstacles, and deliberately asymmetrical structures created a maze that defied mathematical prediction. Sarah Chen watched as Vela attempted to process the scene before her. The Nexer ambassador's silver skin rippled with what Sarah had learned to recognize as distress. "This is most irregular," Vela managed, her usually perfect voice wavering. "That's the point," Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez replied, grinning as she adjusted the virtual reality interface on her combat helmet. "The ordered void expects perfect patterns. We're teaching your people how to think outside the box by literally throwing away the box." In the 3 months since first contact, Earth had transformed from a quarantined world to the galaxy's most unusual military academy. Nexar warriors, their bodies engineered for perfect combat efficiency, were learning to be inefficient. It went against everything they believed in. "Begin Simulation 17, Sarah commanded. The holographic projector sparked to life, creating a representation of the ordered void's attack pattern. The crystalline wave of perfect geometry began its advance, converting everything in its path into mathematically precise structures. A squad of Nexar warriors moved to engage, their movements still too precise, too predictable. The simulation showed them being instantly converted into geometric patterns, but then the human instructors joined in. Maya led her team in what appeared to be pure chaos. They threw smoke grenades that released random particle patterns. They played music, everything from classical to heavy metal, creating interference patterns that disrupted the entity's calculations. Most importantly, they moved erratically, never establishing a pattern the void could predict. "Watch closely," Sarah told Vela. "See how they're not just being random. There's method to the madness. Controlled chaos." For the first time, the simulation showed success. The ordered void's advance slowed, its perfect patterns disrupted by the unexpected variables the humans introduced. "Fascinating," Vela murmured. "Your warriors appear to be dancing." "Capoeira," Maya explained between moves. "Brazilian martial art that combines dance and fighting. The void can't predict if we mix combat with art. It short-circuits its analysis protocols." In another section of the facility, human artists worked with Nexar engineers. Jackson Chung, a graffiti artist from New York, was teaching them about abstract expressionism. The Nexar, who had only ever created art through perfect mathematical formulas, struggled to understand the concept of spontaneous creation. "Don't think," Jackson instructed a confused Nexar engineer. "Feel. Let the paint flow where it wants to go." "But how can we determine the optimal pattern without calculations?" the engineer asked. "That's exactly what we're trying to avoid. The beauty of art isn't in its perfection, it's in its imperfection. The void expects patterns. We're teaching you to be unpredictable." Vela watched as the engineer hesitantly made their first random brushstroke. The resulting splash of color was gloriously asymmetric. Several nearby Nexar visibly flinched at the disorder, but Vela noticed something else, a tiny spark of excitement in the engineer's eyes. "Captain Chen," Vela said suddenly, "I believe I am experiencing what humans call an idea." Sarah turned to her, intrigued. Over the past months, she'd watched the Nexar ambassador gradually shed layers of rigid perfection, becoming more adaptable. "What kind of idea?" "The void converts ordered systems into crystalline patterns, yes. But what if we could use that against it? Your human art forms, they often involve deliberate disruption of patterns. What if we created a weapon that appears ordered but contains hidden chaos? Maya stopped her training sequence, interested. Like a virus. Like a work of art, Vela corrected. A perfect pattern that, when absorbed by the void, would release pure chaos into its system. We could use the entity's own perfection as a delivery mechanism for disorder. Sarah felt a smile spread across her face. Vela, that's not just an idea. That's a beautifully human idea. Sneaky, creative, and just a little bit crazy. The next weeks saw an unprecedented collaboration. Nexar engineers worked alongside human artists, musicians, and chaos theorists to create what they called the disorder bomb. On the surface, it appeared to be a perfect crystalline structure, exactly the kind of ordered system the void couldn't resist consuming. But within its lattice, they wove elements of human chaos, jazz solos that never resolved, abstract art that defied mathematical analysis, and combat maneuvers that followed no logical pattern. The Nexar contributed their advanced technology, but for the first time in their history, they were not striving for perfection. They were striving for beautiful imperfection. It goes against everything we believed, Vela confessed to Sarah one evening, watching humans and Nexar train together. For millennia, we saw disorder as a flaw to be corrected. We never imagined it could be a strength. That's the thing about humans, Sarah replied. We learned long ago that our flaws often turn out to be our greatest advantages. Perfect order is predictable. Life, real life, is gloriously messy. As they watched, a Nexar warrior attempted a capoeira move, stumbled, but recovered with an improvised flourish that would have been impossible to predict. Both human and Nexar observers applauded the beautiful mistake. The art of chaos was being learned, one imperfect moment at a time. The only question was, would they master it before the ordered void reached Nexar Prime? The first test of the disorder bomb failed spectacularly. Not in the way they'd hoped. An explosion of creative chaos that would disrupt the ordered void's patterns. Instead, the entity had simply absorbed their weapon, converting its carefully crafted disorder into yet another perfect crystalline structure. I don't understand, Vela said, staring at the simulation results. We followed every principle of chaos theory. The patterns should have been impossible to predict. Sarah watched the replay again, her mind racing. The test site, a remote Nexar outpost, had been converted just like all the others. But something about this transformation was different. Wait, she said suddenly. Play that back at quarter speed. The holographic display showed the moment of conversion in excruciating detail. The void's geometric patterns swept forward as expected, but just before they consumed the disorder bomb, there was a microscopic hesitation, a fraction of a second where the perfect patterns stuttered. There, Sarah pointed. The void had to work to convert our chaos. It's not immune to disorder, it's adapting to it. Maya Rodriguez, who had been studying the entity's behavior patterns for months, stepped forward. So it's learning, just like we are. Which means we need to evolve faster than it does, Jackson Chang added, his artist's eyes seeing patterns within patterns. We're thinking too linearly. Even our chaos has become predictable. The realization hit the combined human Nexar team hard. They had created weapons of disorder, but they'd done it in an ordered way. They'd systematized chaos, making it comprehensible to the very entity they were trying to confuse. We need to go deeper, Vela said, her voice carrying an emotion that would have been impossible for a Nexar just months ago. Excitement. Not just creating chaos, but becoming chaos. The next phase of their preparation transformed the testing facility into something that defied description. Human artists worked blindfolded, creating pieces they couldn't see. Musicians played instruments they'd never touched before. Warriors trained in fighting styles they invented on the spot. Most remarkably, the Nexar began to change. Their perfectly symmetrical architecture started incorporating random elements. Their speech patterns developed unique inflections, Some even began experimenting with human concepts like humor and spontaneity. "Watch this," a young Nexar engineer named Kex told Sarah one morning. They had been one of the first to embrace human chaos, and their silver skin now rippled with constantly changing patterns. Kex pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared. But instead of the usual perfect projections, this one showed swirling, ever-changing forms. "What am I looking at?" Sarah asked. "A visual representation of human jazz music, processed through Nexar quantum computers, but with randomized variables introduced by emotional responses." Kex's eyes gleamed. "We're not just creating disorder anymore. We're creating new forms of order that contain infinite potential for chaos." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. During a joint training session, a human child, one of the base personnel's daughters, wandered into the facility. Instead of following the carefully planned chaos of the training, she simply played, her movements completely natural and unplanned. The void simulation couldn't predict her at all. "That's it," Maya whispered, watching the child. "We're still trying too hard. Real chaos isn't planned. It's natural. It's life itself." The revelation led to a complete overhaul of their strategy. Instead of trying to create perfect weapons of disorder, they began incorporating natural elements into everything they did. The disorder bomb was redesigned, not as a single weapon, but as millions of tiny seeds of chaos, each containing a fragment of pure, unplanned life. But the ordered void was approaching faster than expected. Long-range sensors showed it had already consumed 3 more star systems, and its patterns were becoming more complex. It was learning from each encounter, developing countermeasures to disorder. "Time for another test," Sarah announced, watching as their new weapons were prepared. This time, they didn't just launch a single bomb. They released a cloud of microscopic chaos seeds, each one carrying a different element of unpredictability. The simulation chamber hummed to life. The void's patterns approached, beautiful and terrible in their perfection. The chaos seeds activated, each one releasing its unique payload of disorder. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the void's patterns began to shift. Where before they had simply converted chaos to order, now they seemed unable to process the sheer variety of disorder they were encountering. Natural chaos, it seemed, was harder to predict than artificial chaos. "It's working," Vela breathed, watching as the simulation showed the void's advance actually retreating from the areas seeded with natural disorder. "But will it be enough?" Sarah watched the data streams, noting how the entity was already beginning to adapt to this new threat. "No," she said finally. "This won't be enough on its own. We need something more." "What more is there?" asked a Nexar warrior. "We've thrown every form of chaos we can think of at it." "Exactly," Sarah said, a plan forming in her mind. "We've thrown chaos at it. But what if instead of fighting order with chaos, we found a way to make order and chaos work together?" The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. The Nexar had spent millennia perfecting order. Humans had embraced chaos as a natural part of existence. Neither approach alone could defeat the void. But together, how long until it reaches Nexar Prime? Sarah asked. 2 weeks, Vela replied. Maybe less. Sarah looked around the room at the assembled humans and Nexar, each having evolved so far from where they started. Then we have 2 weeks to do the impossible. We need to find a way to make perfect order and perfect chaos dance together. The final phase of preparation had begun, and with it, the greatest evolution of all. The merger of humanity's beautiful chaos with the Nexar's perfect order. They just had to hope it would be enough. The crystalline spires of Nueva Harmonia no longer gleamed with perfect symmetry. In the days leading up to the void's arrival, the city had transformed. Nexar architecture now flowed with organic curves inspired by human designs. Streets that once formed perfect grids now wandered like rivers. And in the spaces between order and chaos, something new had emerged. Sarah Chen stood at the command center, watching as the ordered void approached Nexar Prime. The entity had grown enormous, its perfect patterns now spanning half the solar system. But it was no longer the same force that had first threatened the Nexer. Like them, it had evolved. Final preparations are complete, Vela announced. Her silver skin now rippled constantly with changing patterns, a visible symbol of how far the Nexer had come from their rigid perfection. Though I must admit, calling them final preparations feels strangely limiting. Welcome to humanity's relationship with plans, Sarah replied. They're more like guidelines anyway. Around them, the combined human Nexer Defense Force made their last adjustments. Artists worked alongside engineers, their creations defying categorization. Warriors moved in formations that appeared random but contained hidden patterns. Musicians played instruments that merged Nexer quantum harmonics with human jazz improvisation. The void has entered the outer defense perimeter, Maya reported from her station. It's different. The patterns are more complex than anything we've seen before. They watched as the entity encountered their first line of defense, a field of chaos seeds enhanced with Nexer technology. Previous tests had shown promise, but the void had learned. Its patterns shifted, attempting to absorb and convert the disorder. But these seeds were different. Instead of pure chaos, they contained strands of order woven through their randomness. When the void tried to convert them, it couldn't separate the patterns from the disorder. Phase 1 is working, Jackson Chang observed from his position at the Artistic Warfare Station. It's slowing down to process the complexity. Launch Phase 2, Sarah commanded. Across Nexer Prime, massive transmitters activated. They broadcast a symphony unlike anything ever created. Nexer quantum harmonics layered with human music, each note both perfectly calculated and completely improvised. The sound waves carry patterns within patterns, order and chaos, so intricately merged they became indistinguishable. The void's advance faltered. Its perfect geometry began to show signs of strain as it tried to process information that was simultaneously ordered and chaotic. Now for the hard part, Sarah said. Vela? The Nexer ambassador stepped forward, placing her hand on a control panel that hummed with power. Are we certain about this? The calculations suggest a 67.2% chance of catastrophic failure. Sarah smiled. That means there's a 32.8% chance of success. In human terms, we call those pretty good odds. Vela's expression shifted in what Sarah had learned was the Nexer equivalent of a smile. Then let us be gloriously imperfect together. They activated their final weapon, not a bomb, not a virus, but a transformation wave that rippled out from Nexer Prime itself. The planet's entire infrastructure, every building, every system, every particle had been reconfigured to exist in a state of quantum superposition between order and chaos. The void encountered this wave, and for the first time in its existence, it couldn't categorize what it was facing. It couldn't convert order to pattern because the order contained chaos. It couldn't eliminate chaos because the chaos contained order. It's working, Maya shouted, watching as the entity's perfect patterns began to fracture. The void is trying to retreat. But retreat was no longer an option. The transformation wave had surrounded it, creating a bubble of reality where perfect order and pure chaos danced together in endless variation. The void's patterns began to shift, not into crystalline perfection, but into something new. Order and chaos merged within it, transforming the entity itself. Look, Vela whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Where the ordered void had been, a new form took shape. It was neither the perfect geometry of before nor pure disorder, but a swirling, ever-changing matrix of patterns that contained infinite possibility. We didn't destroy it, Sarah realized. We evolved it. The transformed entity hung in space like a newborn galaxy, its patterns now a testament to the beauty that could exist between order and chaos. After a moment, it began to move, not with the relentless purpose of before, but with what almost seemed like curiosity. It's trying to communicate, Vela announced, as signals began pouring in. The patterns, they're not trying to convert anymore. They're trying to understand. In the days that followed, both humans and Nexar worked to establish communication with the transformed entity. It had evolved beyond its original nature, becoming something that could appreciate both the perfection of order and the beauty of chaos. Nueva Harmonia would never return to its state of perfect symmetry, but nobody wanted it to. The city had become something more, a place where order and chaos complemented each other, where perfection was found in imperfection. "You know," Sarah said to Vela as they watched a sunset that painted mathematical fractals across clouds of pure randomness, "when you first came to Earth asking for help, I don't think either of us imagined it would end like this." "End," Vela replied, her silver skin reflecting the chaotic patterns of the sky. "My dear friend, I don't believe this is an ending at all. After all, isn't that what humans taught us? That the most beautiful things in life are the ones that never stop evolving." Above them, the transformed void continued its dance of order and chaos, a testament to the truth they had discovered together. That perfection wasn't found in pure order or pure chaos, but in the infinite possibilities that existed between them. In the end, it wasn't humanity's chaos alone that saved the galaxy, nor was it the Nexar's order. It was the willingness of both species to evolve, to learn from each other, and to discover that the most perfect thing of all was the courage to be beautifully imperfect.